Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast. We're always talking everything college hoops. Could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus, and we appreciate that. We know that there's a huge sports void to fill. There's only so much of The Last Dance or the WNBA Draft or ESPN Horse with Chauncey shooting outside with the wind and Mike Conley shooting inside in his home gym. There's only so much we can do. So what we're trying to do here is just fill your ears with some college basketball rewind from this past season. One of those teams that had a really turnaround, rebirth, reincarnation, the Illinois Fighting Illini. And we brought in Scott Richey. Scott works for the News-Gazette. He is an AP Top 25 voter. He has his own podcast, which you can rate, review, and subscribe to, Inside Illini Basketball. And he even has a daily feature at IlliniHQ.com called Good Morning Illini Nation. Please check out all of those things for Scott, and please don't forget to give him a follow on Twitter at all lowercase SRRICHEY to get all of your Fighting Illini fixes, college hoops. Scott and I talked over a number of different things. Of course, we talked over Ayo's decision to enter the NBA draft and what that means moving forward. We also talked little Kofi Cockburn, big man, started the trend by going into the NBA draft process, and if those two student athletes decide to come back or not. We talked about the wholesale changes on both sides of the ball for Coach Underwood and the coaching staff and what that meant and how that changed success this year. We talked about pickles, we talked about blind pigs, and we talked about TJ Walker. Also talked about the greatness and underrated appreciation that is Trent Frazier, quote-unquote soul of the team. Scott and I also discussed a couple of other student athletes that really helped the Illini find success inside the Big Ten this year. I have to tell you, this is one of those teams that could have made that run to a Final Four. It could have made that run to a Sweet 16. It could have surprised. I mean, we saw early on this season that any one of these college basketball teams can beat anybody anytime. And when you have a point guard and a shot maker, Ayo Dosunmu, and you have a big man, a difference maker on both sides of the ball at the rim, Kofi Cockburn, and you have a great coaching staff led by Coach Underwood and a couple of guys that have been there vets like Trent Frazier, that just spells a recipe for March success. You know, as always, we'll scratch our head and ask, who knows? We'll never know. But we did recap all of the highlights from the Fighting Illini season. We hope that you enjoy the conversation. If you like what you're listening to, please give the podcast a follow over at SDS Podcast, Efficiency of Keystrokes, of course, on Twitter. Please give Mike a follow at Randall Rant. He is doing unbelievable work on all fronts for the podcast by getting it out into your earbuds. A quick thank you to Spreaker and a quick thank you to Bell Jar for the intro music. Really like what you're listening to? Don't forget to hit up Scott's podcast. Go over to your podcast consumption vehicle of choice and leave a nice review for Screen the Screener or for what Scott's doing on his end. Kindness is always cool. Hope everybody's staying safe out there. Hope everybody's calm. Hope everybody is healthy, and hope everybody has a smile on their face. And we hope that we help you through raking the leaves, doing some work outside, washing the dishes, whatever that little task might be that you're doing at home while you're helping everybody stay safe. Cheers, everybody. Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast. We're still trying to talk everything college hoops, even though we can't watch much of those college hoops. One of the people that we've brought in to try to talk and extend the conversation a little bit further, Scott Richey from the News-Gazette. Scott is a top 25 voter for the AP poll, and you can follow him at SRRICHEY. Please follow him over at Twitter. Scott, thanks for giving the podcast a few minutes here.
Not a problem. I mean, I'm always down to talk hoops. Even like, as you said, we don't have any to watch right now.
It's a little bit tough. I think everybody that needs their fix, not quite getting what they need right now. And so we just want to ask, I guess, are you holding up all right out there? Is there any good distractions that you've run across while trying to pump out your content and fill some time?
Doing well. And, at the News-Gazette, we've been able to maintain, basically, churning out a sports section every day with just local copy. In this moment, I'd call that a real win. Staying, occupied otherwise, like I did, like what seemed like most everyone in America did. I binged through Tiger King on Netflix. I've caught up on a lot of the shows that I fell behind on during basketball season when I was covering games 2, 3, 4 times a week, being on the road. So doing what I can. There's no sports actually to go out and see right now.
Yeah, we wish we can get out and see some of those sports. And one of the things that we always kind of struggle here with is especially with these off-season no sports podcasts, is what the jumping off topic point is. And it seems like we have a good one here your point guard, your guy, your big shot maker, Ayo Dosunmu, declared for the NBA draft just this week. Make sense of this for us, Scott. I know he's falling in line with past practices of the last few years of, if you're getting some good buzz, why not go ahead and declare? You wrote about this over at the News-Gazette. What's the feel out there concerning this news? Is it worry, or is it go get yours, or thank you for your service, or what's the feel out there as far as Dosunmu declaring for the NBA draft?
But I think you hit on every feeling the Illinois fan base is having right now. I would not say that this was unexpected news at all. This since he decided to come back for his sophomore season, and it didn't even test the draft waters a year ago. Everything was sort of building to this year being likely his last year at Illinois, and I think a lot of people understood that. And while he did declare for the draft this week, the door is still open, of course, for him to come back for his junior season at Illinois. And the uncertainty of what the draft is going to look like, what the next NBA season is going to look like, could play into that. But he's not putting all of his eggs in one basket. He hasn't hired an agent yet. There's the chance that he will come back. I don't know that that's going to be a great chance. His goal since he was in high school was to get to the NBA. And one more year of college basketball, it just opens up, for opportunities for his game to be picked apart even more. I think, the longer a player is in college is unfortunate in some instances, but the more NBA organizations kind of see what they can't do instead of maybe what they can do.
Game film that these scouts get their hands on, you're right. The finer tooth comb breaks out, and then you start picking apart, like, what is this player? What does this play? What does this student athlete do on a pick and roll defense? What's their decision making at end game situations? And I think that's one of the things that separates Dosunmu from a couple other players. Let's just talk about how good and how great he was this past year. He won games on last possession shots and possessions. He played winning basketball. He helped change the culture there in Illinois. He has NBA size. He's definitely shown improvement during his sophomore season, which was like kind of astounding. And he became one of the best players in your conference. What are some of the elements that make Ayo such a special player?
I think there's a few things that go into it. And, first of all, you said, he helped change a culture. Like, he bought into Illinois basketball at one of its lower points, maybe, in program history, just with the stretch of seasons without an NCAA tournament appearance, after a coaching change, a tough first year for Brett Underwood. He saw Illinois as a place for him to leave a mark, and I would say he certainly did. He got Illinois back into the national conversation, basketball-wise. And he did so because I do see him as an NBA prospect. He is unreal in transition, and I think there were only two players that were better scorers in transition this year than he was. Just with the ball in his hands, in an open court, he has one goal, and that's to get to the basket, and he usually gets there. And he's not quickest, he's not the fastest guy, but he eats up a lot of ground, some long strides. He just has a knack for finding his way through that open court. You have to get to the rim.
It seemed like he has a little bit of Kobe White-ish, from UNC, now of Chicago Bulls, in your area, to his game. And it seems like there's a little bit of similar skill sets. I think we can, pick apart the athletic part, but I think there's something to be taken from there. You mentioned the change of culture and the roster full of talent. Coach Underwood and his staff brought in loads of talent. Your center, Kofi Cockburn, set the trend for declaring for the NBA draft, before Ayo, without an agent. Do the listeners a favor, Scott. Explain the cross-section that Cockburn holds with his immense size, his uber skill set, his legit effort getting up and down the court, and his overall grit. He's only going to get much, much better, which is like a little scary, right, Scott?
Yeah, and I think maybe the one thing about Kofi that is out there and people know, but maybe it's just not a common part of his story, is he really only started playing true organized basketball in high school when he came to the U.S. from Jamaica.
That's crazy.
He's got 5 years of really organized basketball under his belt. Big Ten Freshman of the Year. Yeah, in that fifth year.
Right.
Yeah, there's boundless upside, I think, for him. I just think back to when I first saw him play in person. He was still in high school, was playing on the UIBL circuit. Just to see a player at his size, and he's gotten a little bigger even since, but move as well as he did and run the court. Like, I shook his hand, and like, I have pretty big hands, but it's just swallowed mine. He is a huge human being, and maybe it doesn't fit the idea of an NBA big man now. 15, 20 years ago, like, he doesn't even wind up at Illinois. He's straight to the pros probably. I think even though he doesn't fit that idea now, like there's still a place for him in the NBA. Do I think it's this year? I don't. I mean, I think he would be better served by coming back to Illinois for his sophomore season, just refining his skill set a little bit, and then moving forward, and maybe just showing a little more versatility in his offensive game. But just the way he works and his nature, I mean, he's this big guy, but is a little soft-spoken, really funny, can be, and he'll find a role somewhere in the NBA. I just don't know that it's going to be like now.
That's a great point, because you brought up what the NBA game looks like now. And, we're not just talking about stretch fours. We're talking about stretch fives, and we're talking about, the Rockets trading their all-star starting center that they gave a 4-year contract to because they wanted to go small and wanted to be more versatile in the defensive end. But some of the other attributes that we talked about with Cockburn might actually help him there, like that effort that we mentioned up and down the court, his willingness to work. You illustrated it perfectly with just how large of an individual he is. And there's no teaching size, and basketball still is a game where if you can get some easy twos, you're going to find a job. And I think that's where Cockburn is going to find his niche in the NBA, getting those easy twos and being a nuisance on the defensive end. We didn't mention Coach Underwood yet. I think we need to talk about Coach Underwood a tiny bit. And, we talked about the change of culture, and he's obviously a large part of that, a large element of that. He might be a little bit closer to Chris Beard than any of us want to know or realize or admit. And Coach Beard, got to a title game and really helped turn Texas Tech into this basketball powerhouse and turned himself into a top 10 coach in the business. Maybe Coach Underwood is headed that direction. He had a high possession offense at Oklahoma State with Juwan Evans and kind of flipped the script a little bit here this season as far as his style, his vibe, and his focus. Can you do us a favor? Lift the curtain a little bit for the listeners and talk about the changes and the tweaks that Coach made over the past few seasons to accommodate to Big Ten play.
Well, the changes were wholesale this season.
Yeah.
When he first got to Illinois, he stuck with the system that he ran at Stephen F. Austin, that he ran at Oklahoma State, and defensively that was that hyper aggressive ball denial scheme that wanted to take teams out of what they did offensively with no second option. I mean, that was the defense, and offensively it was the spread offense that he runs, a lot of action through the pinch post. And he basically just abandoned both of those things season at Illinois. Defensively, it wasn't like pure pack line, but it was essentially pack line. He took advantage of having Kofi Cockburn at 7 feet and 290 pounds. And while he's not like a shot blocker, he makes players think twice about attacking the rim when he's there, because he takes up a lot of real estate, and
he's a little bit of a deterrent.
Yeah, and then it worked. That defense maybe didn't force as many turnovers, but it was significantly better than the 2 years prior. And then offensively, there was another change, and another change, partly because of Kofi Cockburn, and they went to a lot more ball screen action, and the combo of Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Cockburn, and that was really successful. The changes he made, and it's not always, I think, easy for a coach to essentially abandon kind of what got you there. His system is what made him really successful at Stephen F. Austin and got him the Oklahoma State job and got him the Illinois job, and then he just put it all in his back pocket and went with something that fit his team. This year, just a little, I wouldn't say a little more, a lot more. And, the success was the result of it. From 21 losses to 21 wins.
That change that you're talking about on both sides of the ball obviously yielded unbelievable results. And to be honest, I don't know if many other coaches would make such dramatic changes on both sides of the ball. I mean, we've talked to a number of different people where they said like, oh, well, we adjusted this and tweaked this on offense. And because we have this personnel, we decided to pack it in a little bit more on defense, but do it on both sides of the ball. I mean, talk about adjusting to what your roster holds and then really playing to those strengths. That's exactly what Coach Underwood did. Scott, we've talked about obviously your 2 stars declaring for the NBA draft and how there's lots of NBA-ish talent on this team. You have a great coach, who we just talked about, and all the adjustments that he made. And to be honest, the program has something to prove and a little chip on their shoulder. Play fortune teller here for the fans out there, Scott. What does your crystal ball tell you that this team was capable in March, if it actually happened? Are we talking like win a game, a Sweet 16, maybe something a little bit dreamier, like that, visit to the title game with Coach Weber in 2005 and that nutty backcourt that we loved. Personally, Mike and I loved D. Brown and Luther Head and NBA All-Star to be Deron Williams. Like that team was bananas. So what did the crystal ball hold for this particular Illinois squad if March took place?
Yeah, kind of thinking about that, and my vision of what March could have been changed several times, during the season. Yeah, there were some moments early where it felt like same old, and things maybe hadn't changed as much as was expected inside the program and from outside the program. And there were some tough games there and some rough games. The Miami game probably being for just falling behind by 27 points in the first half. That felt like Illinois basketball of old. Got better. January was a success. 7-game winning streak. It was like, okay, this looks good. And then a 4-game losing streak that followed. But the way Illinois was playing at the very end of the season, and to beat Iowa at home in the regular season finale, it was providing a glimpse of what that team was rounding into when it mattered most. And I thought Sweet 16 was a legitimate possibility. I think it would have been a little tougher to go further than that. Certainly possible. A team can just get on a run in the NCAA tournament and, it'd be really tough to stop. But for a team that hadn't even made the tournament since the 2012-13 season, the Sweet 16, I think everyone would have been happy with that.
I'm totally with you there. I think that there's potential for them to be one of those lower seeds, like a 5 seed, a 6 seed, a 7 seed, maybe an 8 seed that plays that 1 seed in that second round that could realistically look at a Final Four run. But I think the realistic picture here, I know I'm crazy talking about Illinois Final Four run this season, is maybe if those guys come back, we can talk about that next season. That may sound a little crazy or a little silly, but that's kind of where I was at with this squad because they were playing so well. You referenced the Iowa win. It seemed like they were one of those teams that kind of beat anybody anywhere. And if you're playing on a neutral, why not take the team that has an incredible point guard with a great change of speeds and this monster in the middle that's going to make you think twice about driving the lane and get every defensive rebound? That makes sense. Do us a favor, Scott. After finishing 4th in the Big Ten, housing some NBA-ish talent the past few seasons, this is now kind of a sustainable model for success at Illinois, the fan base and Coach Underwood. Do us a favor, shed some light on some of the other student athletes that are going to promote this level of success moving forward for Illinois basketball that are hanging around that maybe aren't getting the shine that they should.
Well, a lot of next season obviously depends on the decisions that Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Cockburn make. And
sure,
if one or both of them end up leaving, it puts Illinois in maybe a little bit more of a pickle just because it's tough to replace one of those guys, let alone two. But the one player that's going to be back next season that has just been steady in his time at Illinois is Trent Frazier. His offensive game maybe took more of a backseat this season. A really good defender. Regularly drew the toughest assignment, but one rough shooting season does not overshadow the fact that he is a really good shooter, and I can see a real bounce back coming for him as a senior. He's already 1,000-point scorer. He's a guy that maybe didn't get talked about enough just for what he did on the court last season. Georgi Bajanishvili, kind of the soul of that team. If I could have his outlook on life all the time, that would be great. He's just such a positive guy, and he came from a really rough start in his life, but it hasn't allowed that to affect him. He also had kind of a rough finish to his sophomore year after a really, really good freshman season, but he's another guy that can kind of bounce back into form. Probably the one guy that very few people even know about is Austin Hutcherson. He was a Division III transfer, sat out this past season. He's a lights-out shooter. He's got good size and length, 6'6", but he can run the point if he needs to. He can probably play 3 different positions. Illinois is a team that needs shooting, and he is going to bring a lot of it. So that's a guy next year that I'm kind of looking to have maybe a real breakout.
That's the kind of scouting report that we're looking for. If we're looking for, hey, who is going to really hold the fort down for Fighting Illini moving forward? That's exactly what we were hoping for. All right, Scott, let's put your NBA scout hat on for the listeners outside. Inside your conference of the Big Ten, we're just going to ask your 2 cents on a couple of different players that you got to see play in person and got to know during your coverage for their careers. Let's start with Cassius Winston for Michigan State. The dude was a National Player of the Year preseason for a reason. What did he do in the second half of the season that really helped display that type of status? Maybe his first half of the season, he was dealing with the unfortunate personal circumstances, but how did he perform the second half of the season? And what would your NBA scout hat tell us about Cassius Winston, the great point guard for Michigan State?
Well, the second half of the season, Cassius Winston became Cassius Winston again. He just got back to playing his game. My NBA scout hat, what a gritty dude. And if that's your backup point guard. There's always going to be questions about his athleticism just because he's not a super athlete, but he's a winner, can knock down shots. He knows how to run a team. Put your second unit in his hands, and I think you're going to be pretty happy.
The first team All-America that lived inside your conference all season, Luka Garza. Loads of numbers all over the stat sheet and the box score. He was super efficient. What made the load in the post so great this season? And I guess the second part of that is, do you think he will churn much like your stars that we talked about on your team?
Well, I haven't seen Luka kind of mentioned in many mock drafts in your definitely not the first round, not even really the second round. So I think to the grin of other Big Ten teams, he'll be back at Iowa next year, would be my guess. There's two things that obviously kind of stood out to him. Just watch his growth this year. The one is, he can stretch the floor as a center and knock down threes. Just plays with a real super confidence about his game that opposing fans, at least Illinois fans, it kind of rubbed him the wrong way a little bit, but I like that in a player. And then just with his post game, so few guys that can get a seal on the block as quickly as he can. He's just super physical, gets his position, and then goes to work, and it's really tough to stop him. Again, he's another guy that's maybe not a super athlete. I feel like he's a bit of a plotter. That's probably why he will be back at Iowa next year, but it doesn't hurt him in the college game. Obviously. No,
there's room for those guys, whether it be the slow prodder, like we're, kind of classifying Garza there, or the undersized point guard that might not have an NBA future that can absolutely run a team and wreck a tournament if the opportunity is given to him. And one of those guys that's hung around for, seemingly forever is Lamar Stevens at Penn State. He is just a hoss. He is skilled. He's got NBA size. He's been there 4 years. Garza looks at Stevens and looks at the season that he had and the career that he had, and playing 4 years at college doesn't really hurt, huh, Scott? What about Stevens?
Lamar Stevens has been an interesting guy to watch over his career, and just the way that he developed into a player that no team in the Big Ten really wanted to deal with. Right. And it was because of his combination. He was so powerful at his size and his athleticism because he could just dominate, an opposing defender. I think maybe the one thing that will probably hold him back a little bit is just his shooting efficiency, but he's another guy that is a clear longish type career role player in the NBA, at least in my opinion, just because he has the physical skills and abilities to stick. And who's to say that he can't fix his shot in the NBA? Because a lot of guys come out of college with question marks there, and then wind up being at least serviceable shooters. So I think he's.
Oh, I think so. I think there's a lot of PJ Tucker to his game, especially like you mentioned, if he can get that shot kind of straightened out a little bit. It was, of course, erratic his whole entire career, but it seemed like he found a little something this season that was a little bit more consistent than it has been in years past. But yeah, I'm with you on him having sustainable NBA career, especially as a wing player. Let's go with one more big man. Let's go Daniel Oturu from Minnesota. Huge defensive factor. He can shoot it a little bit from deep, and he can put up big-time traditional numbers. What do you feel like he can do as far as an NBA player moving forward, and maybe what do NBA minds need to know about Oturu?
Well, I mean, the big skill that he's going to bring is his defensive presence and his shot blocking. That'll be enough to get him on the radar. And the fact that he did prove as a shooter, stretched his range out to the three-point line, maybe not super efficiently, but showed he can make those shots this past season. That's going to open a lot more doors for him. And I've made this comparison before, but what Oturu did coming back for his sophomore year at Minnesota, I think is exactly why Kofi Cockburn should do the same. Because Oturu had a pretty good freshman year. I mean, it wasn't great. He was pretty good, but he came back as a sophomore after improving his all-around game, showing that he can be a shooter. Now we're talking about him as an NBA draft prospect and a legit NBA draft prospect. Kofi could do the exact same thing. I don't know if he's ever going to be a really good three-point shooter, but if he could just show that he can knock down an 18-footer, consistently, because he has a soft touch, he just hasn't shot a lot. That's where more doors open for him, like they have for Oturu.
I think that makes sense. I think the parallel that you made between Oturu and Cockburn is the perfect one, because another year under a great coaching staff like you have there with Coach Underwood and the coaching staff at Illinois, you don't think that they're going to try to stretch out that jump shot a little bit for Cockburn? Yeah, of course, that makes sense. So I agree with your assessment there of if he comes back, then he could definitely get on some radars and turn some people's heads with his multiple skill set. Scott, on your podcast, Inside Illini Basketball, please go rate, review, and help Scott out over there and his team. You chatted a little bit about what Illinois has coming in or is in the works. Allow the listeners to get a feel for maybe one of the talented student athletes that they can look forward to seeing on the court next season.
I mean, the one, I have to go with it. I mean, this is no slight to Adam Miller or Coleman Hawkins, but it's Andre Curbelo. And he's the point guard out of Long Island Lutheran, a great team down on the East Coast. He is probably one of the more underrated players in the 2020 class, in my estimation. He's got international experience. He's played for the Puerto Rican national team for a couple summers now. He is the type of point guard that you want. He makes he just makes everyone around him, so much better. He is a gritty type player, super skilled. His 3-point shot is developing. That's an area where he can improve, but he's a terrific passer. He sees the court really well. He wins. Wherever he goes, he wins. And that's basically the type of player that Brad Underwood is accumulating in Champaign. I think Illinois fans are going to be pretty excited, to watch Andre Curbelo play for several seasons.
Well, when you mention Curbelo, the first thing that comes to my mind is Joel Yali from out in Gonzaga. Talked to Jim Meehan out there about Ayayi. He brought a couple of great points that playing for the French national team has really provided this international experience that some of these other players don't obtain. And you're mentioning that your future point guard or backcourt is going to have that type of knowledge, experience, guile that they can bring to college basketball. I think that makes perfect sense. And I bet that he can step in right away, just the way that Ayayi did this year for the Bulldogs, and find success on multiple levels on the offensive end, the defensive end, and not be intimidated by any atmosphere that they're going to step into, even inside the Big Ten. And then we know the schedule of the Big Ten is a grind. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about here. We'll get you out of here. This will be the last major question. Part of the reason for bringing in all this talent is this new 20-game Big Ten schedule. Your conference was a little bit ahead of the curve here with playing multiple games with multiple opportunities for quad one wins to help them with their March status and seed line. Just how tough is this new Big Ten grind? And do you think it yielded the benefits that the conference hoped for? Or is that question unanswered due to the current unfortunate situation where we didn't get to see any seed lines next to any teams?
Well, even though the bracket was never revealed, the Big Ten was going to have a bunch of teams. I think people that follow college basketball kind of know which ones were going to be there. And, it was going to be at least 8, 9, maybe 10. Right? I think 10 would have been pushing it. I think 9 was reasonable. It came because they did have the chance at all of those quad one type wins, but it worked better this year. That 20-game schedule worked better this year because teams like Illinois and Rutgers and Penn State were better. They'd all kind of been at the bottom of the conference and maybe not really challenging the top 2/3 all that much the past couple of years. This year, that was different. And obviously Northwestern and Nebraska were way down there at the bottom. But the rest of the conference was so competitive. If it can stay at that level, and I think Rutgers is making the moves to be a more consistent winner. I've been on the Steve Peichel train for a long time. I thought that was a great hire when they got him from Stony Brook. If Illinois can keep doing the same, which I feel like Brad Underwood has shown just by stacking recruiting classes that they're on that path, I think the Big Ten can be one of those conferences that regularly gets 8 or 9 or who knows, maybe 10 teams in the NCAA tournament.
That makes it impossible for every coach and every program inside that conference because there's that pressure that exists with every game and every opportunity, knowing that okay, if we can just get a couple games on the road, hold serve at home, we're going to have a chance to make the NCAA tournament, which is kind of what Rutgers followed this year. You mentioned Rutgers, we're based in New Jersey. So we followed the Steve Peichel train and been on it for a little while. We knew from him from Stony Brook. If that's a model that anybody in your conference can follow, that's going to make sense. And that's going to get you a March invite, whether it be as a 10 seed or maybe you're in the playing game in Dayton. That makes perfect sense. Scott, let's get you out of here on our final 3T questions. These are very important. Tastes. Give us one craft beer or brewery that we need to know out there in Champaign, Illinois.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you two because when it comes to beer, I can't always choose just one.
Perfect.
Blind Pig Brewery in Champaign. So it's all local. It's great. They got a bar downtown. That's terrific as well. And then not in Champaign, but very close by in Mahomet, it's just 10-minute drive maybe, is JT Walker's. And it's a restaurant and a brewery, but I really love their brown ale. So I'll give them a shout out too.
If you're in the neighborhood and you're looking for a great place to grab a drink, that might be one of the places. And perhaps if you're doing a drive by at your local package store, then maybe keep an eye out for both of those. Okay, Scott, let's go with one player in the nation, could be inside the Big Ten or any place you saw this season, that you would trust with a last-second possession with the game on the line.
How could I almost not pick Ayo Dosunmu, at least this season? He hit game winners against Wisconsin, Michigan, Penn State, all on the road, mind you. And then not exactly game winners, but like daggers late in the game against Rutgers, Northwestern at home teams, and Purdue on the road. For this year, I'm not sure you can pick anyone besides Ayo.
I don't blame you for picking Ayo at all. I think that's an appropriate pick. I'm surprised more people that we talk to haven't picked Ayo, to be honest. And last one, how about this? Tunes. Who or what have you been listening to while you're trying to pump your content out while you're longing for sports to return? Give the listeners a couple of suggestions out there.
Well, I mean, I'm a huge music guy in addition to sports. I could take you all kinds of different directions. Probably, I'll go with two though. My favorite band has been for 15 years. I think even longer. Is Muse. I just love their music. I like to find new genres. Sometimes go down some strange paths, but like right now, I've been listening to a lot of electro swing and then jazz hop, just two different kind of more instrumental genres that combine electronic music, but also like jazz and swing. And it's weird, but it's where I found myself lately.
I don't think it's weird, and I think when you have time and you have access to that time and to music to listen to, I think you might find yourself going down a rabbit hole and then maybe enjoying the trip down there, especially with some jazz hop. When you mention jazz hop, I think of Tribe Called Quest right off the top of the bat, because they were one of the first to sample classic jazz riffs and then plug them into their songs. And then Muse is supposedly one of the greatest live bands that you can see out on concert, and hopefully cross our fingers that everybody gets to go out to a concert sooner rather than later. Scott, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for enlightening us for Illinois basketball and talking some hoops with us. We totally appreciate the conversation, and we hope you stay healthy, safe, and calm out there. It was really cool talking some hoops, and we hope that we help fill the sports void that people are lacking.
Yeah, no, it was great. I really appreciate you reaching out. And like I said, I mean, I'm down to talk hoops whenever.
Perfect. And hopefully the listeners are ready to listen to Hoop Talk whenever as well. Scott, cheers. Thank you. Cilantro. Gratulatia.